Hey folks, Quill18 here, and welcome to the continuation of my preview for Europa Universalis 4. And in this video, I'm going to continue to answer some various questions that people have asked. And again, if you have any questions, be sure to ask them down in the comments below, and I will continue to make videos trying to answer as many of them as I possibly can. This is one, again, this is from Reddit. How will EU4 handle buildings? I'd like to know more about construction and administrative side of things. So EU4 is similar to EU3. And that as you unlock technologies, or as you develop technologies, you will unlock new buildings, and then you can click on a province and the building tab and just build the buildings there. It costs a certain amount of gold and also requires a certain amount of power points depending on what the type of building is. You're looking at something like 50 gold and 5 power points of the appropriate category to build, the sort of entry-level buildings. And then they get more pricey, and as you develop further technology and more specialized types of buildings. And one of the things that was always kind of tedious in EU3 was trying to find the provinces where the buildings would have to be built. And you were forced to go into the ledger all the time to do that and get your list of buildings, and you would sort of build them there. And I always thought, well, it was a little weird, but it was fine. In EU4, they added a new way to quickly build these buildings. In fact, also build military units. In the top left corner of your screen, there's a button you can click on, and then there's 2 tabs, one for military units and one for buildings. And you go to either one of those and then click on a unit or a building, and it will change the map. It will highlight and show you everywhere where you can build one of these options. So in the case of a building, for example, you'll have one color for provinces that already have the building, one color for provinces where you cannot build the building because maybe you're missing a prerequisite, for example, and then a third color for provinces where you can build a building. And actually there's a stripy color to show you provinces where you are currently in the process of building it, or building something at least. So then you can just literally just click on the province from there and it will build the building there. Not only that, but in that view, for certain types of buildings, for example, the constable building, which gives you plus 25% tax rate, it will show you in that view how much of a difference it will make. For example, I'll see, in this province, it will effectively add an extra 0.2 gold per month because it's a fairly wealthy province, whereas this one over here, it will only give me 0.04 gold per month because maybe this is a province I just took over, and they're different religion and they hate me and all these things, so there's not much of a tax base there, and it's just a poorer province overall. So I know that, I want to build my constable here first because it's going to have a much better value. Not every building type directly maps in the same sort of way because they just whatever they do something else, so there's not always a helpful little tooltip for that. But generally speaking, you'll be able to see at a glance exactly where you should build everything, and I think that's a huge time saver. In fact, I don't know if you're going to need to use the ledger at all anymore in EU4. I mean, there's still some nice helpful things in there, specifically to sort to see, which nations have the biggest military in that. But certainly for building, not so much. And also for units, the same way. When you click on your unit tab and you click on, say, infantry, it will highlight all the provinces where you have the ability to build it. You'll also get indications to show you which provinces are already building military units. And you can just go click, and now all of a sudden you're building, I don't know how many clicks that was, 6 infantry across your nation. Also in that you get the tooltip that shows you how long it will take to build the unit and how much it will cost, because that can vary by province depending on what kind of buildings you may have built there. So it's like, I can save a little bit of cash if I build my cavalry over here for some reason. And I think it's a great map mode. Works fantastically well, very handy. Next question. Questions about war score and also piecing out and how that all works, because there's slight differences with how war score. So if you don't know what war score is, if you're new to the genre, when you go to war, you set a certain goal, and you have set this thing called a war score, which starts at 0%. As you win battles and as you siege and occupy provinces, you will gain positive war score. Or as you lose battles or you lose provinces to your enemy, you'll get a negative war score. And what you can ask for in a peace deal will be affected by this war score. And especially with the AI, it really influences their choice as to whether they will peace out with you at all. For example, if they feel like they're winning a war, then they will not be willing to give anything up, for example, or even maybe peace out, right? If they've built a 20% war score against you, they may not be willing to accept just a white peace. They're going to only want to they're going to require concessions from you. They're going to want a province, or they're going to want you to concede defeat, which gives them prestige, or they're going to want you to give up 50% of your trade power for the next few years, which is pretty brutal depending on what nation you're playing. So there, so this is the war score, and the question is, how does it go up, and how does it improve, and how does the peace system work? Because, for example, in Crusader Kings 2, you go to war for a specific claim. I claim the title of the Duke of so-and-so. And you go to war, and you build up enough war score to get the people to concede and say, fine, fine, you're the Duke of so-and-so. Well, that's all you can claim in that. It doesn't matter if you've taken over, half of Western Europe. You're still only claiming the one title you went to war for, which is very appropriate for the type of setting and history they're trying to simulate in Crusader Kings 2. In Victoria 2, you go to war for a specific goal. But then as the war continues, you can add more war goals. When you peace out, you can only claim the things that you have valid war goals for, but you can add more goals as you go forward. And then in Europa Universalis 3, for example, it was always this thing where you have, you need a reason to go to war, but then when you negotiate the peace deal, you can more or less negotiate for just about anything that you've claimed. So in EU4, it's still very similar to EU3. If you had a specific claim that you were pressing for the war as your casus belli, then that province usually requires less war score, certainly no diplomatic points, and I don't think it adds to your sort of overall aggressiveness rating. But you can still claim more on top of that, and those things have associated costs. Claiming the actual province that's important is the biggest thing. I believe the war score does tick upwards over time, so even if you can't make more gains, but you can keep sort of sitting on some of your opponent's provinces, the war score will continue to go up ever so slightly. I believe. Again, these things are very subject to change, so take it with a grain of salt. I thought there was one other thing I wanted to talk about when it came to warfare. Oh, aggressiveness rating. Okay, this is a huge one, huge one. So in previous versions of Europa Universalis and also in Victoria, you had something called, well, originally it was called the bad boy rating, but now it was renamed to infamy. It's this idea that as you conquer terrain and be aggressive, you gain a certain amount of infamy. And if ever you go up above a certain limit, the entire world basically considers you to be a villain, and they get a valid casus belli against you, a valid cause for war. Anyone in the world can basically declare war on you, and it's fine. In fact, what will probably happen is half the world will declare war on you simultaneously, so it's very bad. And that sort of thing certainly makes sense. I mean, if you're an aggressor like that all the time, it makes sense that the other countries start to be a little bit leery at you. But what was always weird is the idea that, let's say you spend 100 years, waging war in Western Europe, and then, you end up sending a boat over to Japan, and Japan hates you because of your infamy. Well, that doesn't necessarily make sense. Why does Japan care about anything like that? So now the infamy system has been replaced with this aggression rating, and the aggression falls off over distance. So your neighbors, if you expand aggressively, if you conquer one neighbor, your other neighbors will get extremely nervous. And then their neighbors will still be kind of nervous, but not quite as much so. And then someone that's halfway across the world won't care at all. And what it translates to is a negative to your relationship. And also, once it reaches a certain point, there's also the possibility that they'll get just this sort of, you are a complete, villain, casus belli to invade you. But mostly, the real big part of it, I find, in the AI-based games, is this negative relationship. In a multiplayer-based game, you don't tend to care about the relationship rating so much because it's actual humans making decisions about whether you will make alliances and so on and so forth. But giving a bunch of humans a valid casus belli against you can be very, very dangerous. So you're having to sort of manage that, and it falls off over time. But there's certainly a cost to being very aggressive. Furthermore, what's really quite costly is as you take over provinces that you don't have cores on, you get something called an overextension penalty, and that has a pretty severe impact on, I believe, your tech rate, certainly your trade power, maybe your taxation, and certainly a lot of rebellion as well. So you tend to go into these phases where you take over a lot of land, and then you spend a few years spending all your administrative power creating cores on all these territories to bring down your overextension and just eliminate the rebellion chance. And then once you've brought it down to a reasonable level, then you can go forward again. I think if your overextension ever goes up over 100, you're in particularly rough shape, both diplomatically and sort of internally in terms of rebellions and stability. It's very, very bad. So you want to avoid that as much as possible. So let's answer another question or two. Oh, we talked about DLC a little bit in the last video, but certainly lots of people had questions about, do they have specific plans for DLC? Have maybe asked them about a country creator DLC. What about something like the Aztec invasion style DLC? It's way too early in development for DLC questions. They're absolutely not able to answer any questions about that, and I understand why. I'm sure at this point in the process, I mean, these are creative people, right? You ask a game developer if they've got any game ideas at any point. Well, they'll say they've got 100 different ideas. Well, I'm sure these people, each of them have 100 different ideas for DLC. So put together, you've got 10,000 different ideas available for pulling this off. And so they have no idea what's actually going to get made. And certainly if they set it at this point and then it doesn't happen, or it comes out in a pretty radically changed form, it would be pretty silly. They are still the entire development process is very focused right now on the base game. They're not programming any DLC at any point. I'm sure there will be some. The country creator DLC was an interesting question, because when I brought it up to Thomas Johansson, who is the project lead for EU4, right away he was like, oh, that's a pretty cool idea. It seemed like it might not have even been something that had necessarily crossed their mind yet, but they were certainly considering it. There was a ruler creator for Crusader Kings 2. And I think that was pretty successful and popular. Now, the thing is, you don't actually need one of these creators, one of these country or ruler creators, to make your own, because the game is very moddable, everything is in text files, but not everyone can necessarily understand those. So what that would be is just an interface for manipulating those. And I'm not sure exactly what you would do with a country creator exactly. Set up initial relationships, maybe. Yeah, there's not as much. With a ruler creator, it makes more sense in Crusader Kings 2, because your ruler can have so many different variables assigned to them. But at no point are you sort of changing the structure of your hierarchy within the nation. So I'm not sure a country creator will actually make much sense in EU4, so don't get your hopes up. In terms of something like the Aztec Invasion DLC, that was interesting, because that was another question that may have been asked seriously or not seriously. I don't know. In Crusader Kings 2, people either seem to hate the, what's it called, Sunset Invasion. It's where the Aztecs invade Europe. They either hate it or they love it. So what it is, it's a sort of an alternate history kind of DLC, right? Because obviously the Aztecs never invaded Europe. It was the other way around. It was sort of just a what-if scenario. I'm not sure how many what-if scenarios are available for EU4, but one of the interesting things they said about this DLC, because it's totally optional, right? It was relatively cheap. It was optional. You lose nothing if you don't have it, and you can always turn it off. If you don't feel like dealing with an Aztec invasion, you could have turned it off in Crusader Kings. What was interesting is it didn't actually take a lot of time to develop, and they figured it was just sort of going to be this throwaway kind of thing that, it was a niche thing. Not a lot of people would get it. Well, it turned out to be their highest return on investment DLC they'd ever made. It turned out to be much more popular than expected, and it worked out very well for them. So I think there's certainly an interest in continuing to throw these little things out here or there, especially when you've got a big team and different people can be assigned to it. But again, they have no specific plans, and I don't think that sort of content will work as well in EU4, because there's no unknown part of the world, right? I think that's maybe more of a room for sort of like weird mods and so on and so forth, but we'll see how it goes going forward. I'm going to end this video. The next one, we're going to talk about multiplayer, which is actually a huge topic, and we're going to have to answer a lot of questions there. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.